Hey, friends. So today I'm coming to you to talk about changing your decluttering environment. And the reason why I called this video Changing the Energy of Your Space is because we can make really small changes when we're about to declutter a room that's going to make it slightly easier for us to show up. And that actually does change the energy of the space. The number one thing that holds people back from getting started is usually shame, right? We get upset because our environment, like we picture what the room should be, what we want it to be, and we're upset with ourselves when it isn't that way. And then we start saying things to ourselves that are really unkind. And when we say unkind things to ourselves, it doesn't make us want to show up to the space, right? I've talked about that before. So shame doesn't serve you. There's another video on that you can find on my page as well. So if we can get over sort of that hump of letting go of the shame and showing up to the space, how can we make the environment a little bit easier for us to declutter in? So once you've moved through sort of, you're kind of like, okay, you know what? I'm not happy with myself. I'm not happy with my space, but I am willing to consider that I do want to change it and I do want to make a difference. So then usually the next stumbling block is getting started. Okay. We can think about the changes that we want to make, but if we don't actually take the first step towards change, then we end up just sitting on the couch a little too long, right? Or laying in bed a little too long. So once you actually get started, then it's easier to be in motion. But what you need to do in the beginning is actually start the motion. So let's use the example of your kitchen. If your kitchen is cluttered and you want to change that environment and you're sitting in your family room, and you're probably like scrolling on your phone, or you're playing games on your iPad, or you're watching Netflix and you're thinking about the kitchen, and you know the kitchen is cluttered. So the first thing that we want to not do is to berate ourselves for the state of our kitchen. Our kitchen is in whatever state it's in, right? After that, in order to get started, it becomes easier if you can put yourself in the room that you want to make the change in. So if you're in the family room and you have a mug from your morning tea or coffee, it needs to go to the kitchen, right? That's the place where you're going to wash your dishes. So if you take something from the room that you're in that needs to go to the room you want to work in, that puts you in the space. Okay. And once you're in the space, you choose one small thing to get started. I'm not saying you go into your kitchen, you say, you know what, I'm going to declutter all of the kitchen counters. That is great if that ends up being your end goal, if that's what happens at the end of your decluttering session. But in the beginning, I want you to start small. Okay, if you're really overwhelmed and you're really struggling to stay present in the kitchen, then maybe you decide, okay, you know what, I'm going to put like 3 dirty dishes in the dishwasher. Okay, because you're already standing there in the kitchen, you might as well. If you brought your dirty mug in, you might as well rinse it out, put it in the dishwasher. If the dishwasher's clean, maybe you just start and say, you know what, I'm just going to do the bottom rack. I'm going to put everything away in the bottom rack. Then I'm going to check in with myself and see if I want to do the top rack as well. Right? So when we build on small incremental steps, that's going to contribute to our overall win. So when you're decluttering, you can also make the environment more welcoming. Okay, so I'm a big believer that decluttering does not have to be drudgery. And I'm not saying it's going to be a party. I'm not going to say that, do these, 3 things, and every time you start decluttering, you're absolutely going to love it, and it's going to be a party, and you're going to love showing up to declutter every time. I mean, that's false promises, right? I've never had that consistency of like, yay, I'm decluttering. But we can make it a little bit easier. So one of the things that I have in my kitchen, anyone that has worked with me knows my work, knows that I'm big about kitchen dancing, okay? Because I spend a lot of time in my kitchen. I do a lot of cooking, right? And that requires, getting out the dishes and cooking the meal and then washing things up and putting things away and wiping down the counters. And we all spend a fair amount of time in our kitchens simply because we need to eat to live. So for me, having my kitchen be more accessible and to be a little bit more in flow, to make it easier for me to show up and to feed myself and to feed my family, I like to try and keep on top of basic things. So for me to show up in my kitchen to declutter it, especially if I've had like a marathon cooking session and it's a mess, I have a small speaker in my kitchen. So once I show up to the space, because even as a decluttering coach, there's times when I don't feel like decluttering either. I don't have a perfect home. A lot of people think that decluttering coaches have perfect homes, and we don't. So if there's times when my kitchen's feeling chaotic, and I know that I would feel better if it was improved, then once I'm in the space, I connect my phone to my speaker and I turn on music. For me, some of my favorite songs is enough to get me moving. And when I'm moving, I can declutter. I can, unload the dishwasher. I can rinse the stuff in the sink. I can reload it, because dishwashers for me feel like magical fairies. You just, put in soap, press a couple buttons, and they magically clean your dishes for you, right? That just brings me joy. I probably need a new definition of what joy is, but that makes me really, really happy, because that's one less thing. I don't have to stand there and scrub dishes. For some people, they have to, right? And I have lived in plenty of places long before I had a dishwasher where I had to do that as well. So for me, having the speaker in the kitchen is the one thing that makes it a lot easier to show up to the space. There are other options, right? So you can listen to a podcast. You can listen to an audiobook. I have favorite playlists of music. ABBA's one of my favorite bands to listen to when I'm decluttering, because their music makes me feel good. You can, if you have like a box of like mishmash stuff, like a whole bunch of things that are in this box and you need to deal with it, but it's like a bunch of random things, take it to the family room and sort through it while you're watching TV, right? You can sort it into trash, donate, file if you have paperwork in there that needs to be dealt with, things that need to go to another room, or maybe things that also belong to another person. So when they're compartmentalized, right, then over time, you can choose one compartment at a time to deal with, but you're still getting something done. And you're not just sitting and watching, just watching Netflix. You can sit, watch Netflix and declutter. I'm not saying you have to do that every time you sit down to watch TV. And I will get to that point in a little bit. The other idea is you can crack open a window and let in a bit of fresh air. I mean, that really does make a difference. I do this even when it's raining outside. I have done this even in the winter. I live in Canada. We get some brutal winters. I'll crack it open a little bit just to feel that fresh air. There's the breeze. In the spring and summertime, there's the sound of birds. And there's something about it that's a little bit uplifting. And it also helps us just sort of bring fresh air into the space. And that's good for us as well. The other thing you can do is you can declutter with a buddy. And there's two ways that you could do this. You can have someone who physically comes into your space. You work on your space together and you work on their space together. You can, if you've got a best friend or, a cousin, a relative, a neighbor, whatever, someone that you're close with, just make sure that you and your decluttering buddy have good boundaries. Okay, because there is nobody else that gets to make decisions about your stuff than you. You're the only person, right? And the same thing when you go into their space. It doesn't matter if you don't understand why they're keeping something or why they're letting something go, and vice versa, right? So the other thing you can do, and I think this is the amazing thing with online communities, is that you can find a buddy online, or you can have a friend in real life and you can just text about it or email about it or chat about it on the phone, where you're both like, you know what, I want to declutter. It's kind of helpful to have a friend to feel less alone. And then you guys go and work on your own spaces, and then you can chat about it afterwards. When I first started my decluttering journey, I roped in one of my best friends, Julie. And if you're familiar with any of my coaching programs, Coach Julie has this incredible program on self-care, and she coaches in my program as well. But her and I, we started long before we were decluttering coaches. We were students. And I knew that I had this monumental task ahead of me. My house was just full of stuff. And I was struggling with the same things that the people that I coach, what they struggled with. And that's why I love my job. That's why I do what I do, because I've walked the walk. I'm still walking it. I still have a basement that I haven't dealt with yet, but I've dealt with, the main living floor. And, Julie's done the same. So, I said to her, I said, I say this with love. I think this would be beneficial to you too. And so we were in a decluttering program, and we learned so much. And we're continuing to use the things that we learned in our own homes and with the clients that we help. But Julie made me feel less alone. We even decided to share before and after pictures. She was the first one to share. And after she shared, then I was like, I realized I had a little bit of a competitive streak. So I was like, oh my gosh, well, I'm going to share too. And I remember the first time I took my before picture, I felt nauseous. All of the awful things that I ever thought about myself came up to the surface. And then I realized, though, it's just stuff. Like, this doesn't say anything about who I am as an individual, right? It doesn't say anything about who I am as a wife, as a mother, as a daughter, as a neighbor, as a community member. And I think sometimes we make it mean so much more than it has to, right? It was just stuff. And I was going to take actionable steps to deal with the stuff. The other thing you can do is, if you're a person that responds well to rewards, you can plan to do a little bit of decluttering and then treat yourself to something like a walk in the park, or get an ice cream cone, or preferably do both, right? And now I do have to say, I do not believe that we have to work in order to do pleasurable things. Okay. And we're going to talk about fun in just a couple of minutes. I do believe that we deserve good things, and we deserve to do sociable things and fun things and things that light us up and have things that taste good just because we exist. But if that is a good motivating factor for you and that makes you feel good, then absolutely use that tool. Because I think sometimes we just need to get creative about the environment that we want to work with, right? So you can play around with it and see what works best for you, but don't overthink it. I don't want to see you get stuck in the planning stage for so long that you're not actually executing, because that can be an issue as well. So let's go back to this topic of fun for a sec, because I do think it's tied to decluttering. It is really important in our day-to-day life, no matter what age and stage of life we're in, that we incorporate fun into our daily lives. Okay. And not just because it's a special occasion, not just because it's your birthday, simply because you are a human being that is worthy of love and celebration. You just deserve to have fun, and you deserve good things. If we throw ourselves only into decluttering, right? Declaring that we're going to have fun and do the social things and all of the things that light us up, or say, okay, you know what? I'm going to declutter my whole space first, and then I'll go do the fun things. I really don't want you to do that, because you will then hit burnout. And when we hit burnout, we stop attending to our space. We stop maintaining the things that we had conquered, right? We stop defending them. And then we get caught in that clutter cycle again. So I would rather see you do some decluttering and having fun, versus pushing off the pleasurable stuff till the end, because decluttering is a long game. Okay. And the reason why I say that, it's not because I don't think you're going to be successful, right? It's because we live good, long lives, and we are always going to be bringing new things into our life, right? Sometimes by gift, sometimes by necessity. And then we're also going to be going through the process of letting things go. So that's why I say that it's a long game. But the idea is that the less stuff you have, the less you have to manage. Now, I'm not saying you have to be a minimalist. You can be, if that speaks to you. I have never been a minimalist, and I never will be, right? It's not, I like my house to feel warm and homey and lived in, and I am surrounded by my favorite things. That is what works for me and my family. You get to decide what works for you. But when we do have less stuff overall, it actually gives us back more time, right? We're not hunting for things all the time. And it lowers our stress level as well. So it's actually good for your health. So that's something to think about. So I want you to think about taking a detour from all the hustle and bustle and the way that our lives have a tendency to be same, and interject a little fun, because it is very easy to get lost in all the things that can be asked of us, whether it's parenting, caregiving, working, volunteering, and even the overwhelm of decluttering. So sometimes a routine feels good. Personally, I love my routines, but I also think it's a great idea to shake things up a little bit. So what can you do that you would consider to be fun, right? Maybe even something that's a little carefree. And I don't want you to overthink it. You don't have to feel a certain way. Like there has to be super high amounts of joy in order for something to be considered fun or enjoyable. But when was the last time you blew bubbles? Like, I'm talking really simple things. Or colored in a coloring book. You can get both of those things from the dollar store. Have you created art or created anything just for the heck of doing something creative without it needing to be perfect? One of my favorite having fun stories in my program, I have a coaching program, You're More Than Your Stuff, where you spend a lot of time doing group coaching calls with me and you work through the program. And one of my members, Ellen, what she decided to do was she had this bubble blower that she would always bring out for her grandkids. And she set it up by her garden and it was blowing bubbles while she was weeding her garden. And it was such a simple pleasure, right? That always makes me smile. I love that. The other thing is, can you find somewhere to immerse yourself in nature? Studies have shown that spending time in nature is really, really good for our health. It lowers blood pressure, it lowers stress hormones, it reduces the arousal in your nervous system, right? So that's like fight, flight, freeze. It helps boost your immune system, it improves your mood, and it reduces anxiety. I am such a big believer in time in nature. And I say that not just as a decluttering coach, but as a grief and trauma therapist. Even for myself, I struggle with depression and anxiety. I have to get outside, right? And that's not to say, if you're really struggling, well, if you just went outside, it would make everything better. I'm not saying that at all. Dealing with depression, anxiety, any mental health challenges can be really complex. But I know for me, it actually does make a difference, even if it's just a few moments. Even if you just stand outside your front door and you take a couple of deep breaths, or you sit on your back porch for a few minutes, or you take a walk around the block, something really, really, really simple, and see if that helps. The other thing you can do that's fun is maybe you go see a movie, even if it's by yourself. You don't have to have someone to go with you. You can get takeout, you can eat it at the park. If you live alone, make yourself a meal and set the table. And if your table's cluttered, then just clear off a zone of it, right? Maybe light a candle, make something special just for you. Is there a favorite meal from your childhood that you could make? Comfort food's a really great thing, right? Or have somebody make it for you. I'm always finding that, sometimes we have a hard time asking for help. People are very happy to help us if they know what it is that we need. So that's something to think about too. But my point is, we need to take breaks from the hard things and enjoy the simple things, right? So, it's like how you save, expensive body lotion or perfume for like a special occasion. Go ahead and use it just on an everyday thing. Same with your good china, right? Treat yourself because you're a rare gem. And I think we all deserve those good, pleasurable things. You deserve to be loved and celebrated and treasured, right? So if nobody's told you that later, I want you to remember that you matter. So spend some time having some fun. And then this is the big reason why I say all this. You're probably like, Selena, we're talking about decluttering. You're talking about putting music on when you declutter. Why are you talking about fun? When we go and do fun things, you may find that you have fresh energy to return home and start tackling your space, right? And you get to make the choices in how to make that space more welcoming with all the ideas that I talked about earlier, right? So I think it's important to remember that in every single day, in every way, you matter, because there is no one else on this earth exactly like you, which already makes you a gift. And I really just want you to take some time to celebrate yourself and then come back home and start working towards your space. But don't get so burnt out on being obsessive about your space that you forget to celebrate yourself, because they're actually interconnected, right? When we go out into the world or we do something that we love, we feel better, we're on that high. We can look at our space with a fresh perspective. We can let go of shame, and we can start making choices by one small zone at a time. Okay, there is no win that is too small, because all of those little wins, they stack up, right? And what do they move you towards? Your overall goal. So every time you attend to your space, you're winning. Okay, there's no comparison game. There's no shame talking to ourselves, because we know that doesn't serve us, right? And if you do need more support, you can come find me in my group program, You're More Than Your Stuff. The link is in the About section under products, and there is a payment plan available, okay? I would love to support you. So in the meantime, keep doing the next right thing. Don't be afraid to shake things up a little bit. And just remember that you are capable of more than you think. Bye, everybody.